Mr. Begley, members of the board, we do have two items for board discussion this evening. Our first item for discussion is in regard to some board policies. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Begley, members of the board. Under items for board discussion, letter C, board policy. Number 1, I have 9 pieces of policy for discussion this evening, letters A through I. In your board packet, I have included copies of previous language and the proposed language as per OSBA. Letter A, BBFA, is board member conflict of interest. Ohio Revised Code addresses board member conflicts of interest in contracts. House Bill 33, that we've talked a lot about over the last couple months, adds a new exception for when the contract is with a private institution of higher education that employs a school board member. If the school board member recuses themselves from voting on and discussing the contract and files an affidavit stating the member's employment status with the district treasurer. That's letter A. Letter B, DJB, petty cash accounts. Again, House Bill 33 requires districts to accept cash payments at specified school-affiliated events. Due to the increase in the amount of cash collection points in the district, OSBA has recommended we review district policies and procedures highlighting the importance of good internal controls regarding cash collection points. Additionally, OSBA has updated this policy to generalize some of the specific procedures, recognizing that many of these procedures are established at the district level. That's letter B. Letter C, DM, deposit of public funds. As mentioned in the previous policy update, House Bill 33 requires districts to accept cash payments at specified school-affiliated events. This includes accepting cash at least one concession stand per event. That's letter C. Letter D, GBCC, staff, dress, and appearance. Mr. Smith and others have mentioned the Ohio Auditors of States FAQ that provides guidance to school districts regarding levy and bond issues, as well as political campaigns. Policy GBG and Policy GBCC were updated to prohibit district staff from wearing political buttons, pins, or T-shirts when they're acting in their official capacities. Letter E, GBG, staff participation in political activities. In addition to the information found in the previous policy, this policy provides further requirements to be met given the Auditors of State's FAQ about elections and levy issues. Specifically, it mentions that we are not to try and influence backing for a levy while on duty. Letter F, GBI, staff gifts and solicitations. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order because these two are related. And letter H, KI, public solicitations in the school. OSBA is recommending policy changes to GBI and KI to make it clear that solicitations of political contributions from a district employee are prohibited while the employee is performing official duties or in areas of a public building where official business is transacted or conducted. The Auditor of States FAQ highlights that district employees may financially support or oppose a levy campaign, but reiterates that such support must be voluntary and must be done on the employee's own time. Going back to letter G, JECBBR, admission of open enrollment students. This is one of our own revisions. This policy makes our policy more consistent with neighboring districts. It puts a set number on days that we expect a notification from families who move out of district. And the last one, letter I, KJA, distribution of materials in schools. Policy KJA, distribution of materials in schools, was updated to prohibit district personnel from using district time or resources to distribute materials that support or oppose a levy or bond issue. Again, the Auditors of State FAQ states that sending levy committee communications home with students is an impermissible use of school resources in support of the levy. The district and board should not use public resources or direct district staff to distribute pro or anti-levy materials during time they are compensated by the district. Please let me know if you have any questions over these policies.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Rice.
All right, our second item for board discussion this evening is in regard to a statement of facts and proposed reductions in the event that a levy fails in March. During our last meeting, I talked about the fact that we would come back to you with a proposal to consider if we are on the ballot in March and that levy fails. Prior to sharing that proposal and having some discussion, I would just like to publicly point out that we will be sharing what we believe to be factual information this evening. We are in no way attempting to advocate for the passage of a levy, and we are also not intending to influence anyone's vote. We are simply trying to educate the Board of Education and our community. So in a few minutes, I'll talk about what the district intends to do if that levy fails, but I also, on the other side, would like to repeat what I said during our last meeting, and that is if the levy passes in March, it will allow the district to substantially maintain the current programming and services through June of 2029. If our levy fails, our team is proposing to implement the following staff, program, and service reductions. So at this time, we will distribute a handout that contains a statement of facts inside of a resolution that also lists the proposed reductions to staff programs and services. This resolution is on the agenda this evening for your consideration under other items for board action. So we'll pass those out here and then also have some for the audience as well. I think Dr. Rice is happy to assist. So before we discuss those proposed reductions, I would just like to say, and I do believe that this is a fact, I can say this for every person involved in these discussions, that it was very difficult. These were very difficult conversations for the building, district, and support staff administrators. I can't put into words how difficult it was. And our objective as we started that process was to try to protect teaching and learning as much as possible, as we are an educational institution. But we weren't able to protect it in its entirety, but we did the best that we could. I would also like to add that the district we have to make plans to start chipping away at what is projected to be an $11 million deficit down the line. So I think it's important to note that the savings that goes along with the proposed reductions tonight is an estimated cost of $2 million. So as hard and difficult as those conversations were for us, we've been talking around the table that it's been so difficult. It feels like we're we're saving $10 million, but in reality, it's only $2 million. And again, while the reductions being proposed are significant, they only scratch the surface in terms of getting to an $11 million reduction. So the presentation this evening will be focused on a reduction in staff and a reduction in transportation services and staff. So, and I would just like to say again, the information being shared this evening is not a threat. It is simply to educate the Board of Education and our community. So to be very clear, we are talking about what we have been very clear about what happens if it passes. Here's what the district intends to do if it fails. So in regard to staffing, we're looking at a savings of approximately $688,000. I will say additional staff reductions in the transportation department will be shared during the second part of this presentation. We will get to that in a few more minutes. So first, we're looking at restructuring the middle school schedules to eliminate 5 full-time equivalent teaching positions for an estimated cost savings of $313,000. A note, restructuring that schedule will require hiring 4 additional educational assistants, not to teach, but to monitor students. Next up, eliminate 4.5 full-time equivalent teaching positions at the freshman school and high school campus for an estimated cost savings of $282,000. restructure the curriculum department to eliminate 3 full-time equivalent positions for an estimated cost savings of $188,000, and eliminate half of an administrative position for an estimated cost savings of $54,000. This is in addition to 1 administrative position eliminated prior to the start of the 23-24 school year, and in addition to another half, which I will mention in a few minutes. At this time, we will move to reduce transportation services to the state minimum, which cost savings is estimated to be at $1.3 million. A couple things to consider along with these reductions. There will be no changes to special needs transportation services and grades pre-K through 12. Transportation services for general education students in grades 9 and 10 will be eliminated. Only those students whose residence is more than 2 miles from their school are eligible for transportation, regardless of sitters and daycares. Butler Tech shuttles to and from our high school will not change. The district will explore transportation services for non-public schools, including the potential to declare transportation to certain private, parochial, charter, and community schools impractical. Start times for some schools will change, and those are listed on the presentation: Creekside, Crossroads, Compass, South, East, Central, West, and North. Elimination of 22 bus driver positions, half of an administrative position and half of an office staff position inside of the transportation department. The number of bus drivers and chauffeurs will be reduced from 62 to 40. Again, total estimated cost saving measures of $2 million total. As I said a few minutes ago, this, again, I can say it's factual because everyone involved in these conversations, it has been a very difficult process. And again, $2 million of a projected $11 million down the line. It barely scratches the surface. It's been hard, but this is where we are. We feel like we have to be prepared on both sides if it passes and if it fails. And this time I will open it up to the board for discussion, comments, and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I have 2 questions. I'll direct to Mr. Smith, Mr. Clemens, and Mrs. Lane. But the first one, Ms. Lane, in the past, you've kind of expressed or gave us an example of the mills and how that equates to a $100,000 example. Could you explain that again, just in short, like you've done in the past? I just think it's important that we reiterate that to the public of it's not millions, it's mills, and how that differs, and using the $100,000 value. And then I'll ask my second question when you're done.
So on a $100,000 value of a home, only 35% of that is what's taxable. 1 mil on a $100,000 home cost a taxpayer $35. We are asking for 6.9 mils. So essentially you take the $35 and multiply it by 6.9, should be $241.50 on a $100,000 home.
Okay.
So that's the calculation to use to try and figure out, as a taxpayer, how much my taxes would increase if this levy were to pass.
So if you had a $300,000 value,
You would
take
triple that number.
Triple that, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. And then my question to maybe the 3 of you is, I've done some research on levies that have not passed in some local school districts that have gotten to a certain point where the state has had to get involved. And I saw terms of financial watch, financial emergency. Could you elaborate or clarify maybe a little bit on what that actually means to our residents and to us, if it gets to that point?
So as I present the forecast twice a year in May and November, every time that's filed with the state, they take a look at your bottom line, basically. If school districts are showing a deficit in the next 3 years, that first year being the current fiscal year and the next 2, then that generates usually a letter to a school district saying, hey, you need to start paying attention, you need to start doing some things to try to rectify your upcoming deficit. So in our case, right now, we're 4 years out. So typically, we would not receive a letter yet from the state warning us to start doing what we're doing tonight, practically, coming up with a plan. So in our case, if March comes and we fail the levy fails, we present it again. If we present it again in November, after that November forecast is filed, if it doesn't pass, then that would probably then generate the first letter, which I think now they're calling it precaution, which we would see probably in January. And at that point, they make some recommendations. Take advantage of attrition, for instance. Well, we're already doing that. Review and restructure some of your class sizes, or just some of the program offerings, those type of things. Again, it's just a letter. It's to let you know they're watching. And then you start having, that's called precaution. And then you move into the next level. The longer it takes for you to generate additional revenue, you can move into what they call fiscal caution. And then it continues, fiscal watch, as you get closer to that third year of your deficit. And then the last phase is fiscal emergency, which is the most dire one, where you have to actually have a plan, and the state comes in and actually helps you develop that. And then they kind of guide you through that whole process. And again, if you get to that final step, they actually will come in and basically override the Board of Education and tell us how we can spend our money. That's a short summary version.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's a lot of detail to that, but it's definitely where you have to start planning how to address that deficit.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions or concerns, Mrs.?
No, I appreciate you presenting these facts and having those hard conversations and bringing us with a plan for if we get to that scenario.
I have some questions. We've had to look at dire things before, and it's never easy. I know, we've looked at students that would be possibly impacted. I know you have those numbers, and I've spoke with you earlier just about the impacts as it pertains to transportation for students. I know one of the concerns that I have is, we talk about equity, and equity is definitely important, and equity is important in so many different facets. So one issue pertaining to equity that I'm concerned about is because of the 2-mile limit. It seems to me that you would automatically have a situation where a lot of kids in Fairfield, in the city, would not have that transportation, whereas the kids in grades K through 8 would have that transportation because of the proximity, because of the distance. Have there been any conversations about that or discussions about that in terms of equity?
We had some conversations, just especially when you get to the middle school level. Obviously, I think there would be a bigger impact. What I can tell you is that we have gone through a checklist of potential reductions, and there are not a lot of options there. And as we have had these conversations over the last 4 to 6 weeks to prepare for tonight, I cannot tell you the amount of hours that we've spent on that. And I recognize your point. This is less than ideal. But as we were charged with trying to come up with some potential reductions to start chipping away towards that $11 million, the team felt as if that was the best option because of the amount of reduction of the 1.3 million. There were several things that we looked at that might save us $100,000 or $55,000. And that those kinds of reductions just are not going to get us to that $11 million mark that we might be looking at someday. So we recognize the challenges that come with all of these reductions, but as I said earlier this evening, we are trying to protect teaching and learning, the educational programming as much as possible. And all things considered, this was, again, unanimous for our team as we had those tough discussions that all things considered, this was our best option at this moment in time as we try to move forward with recommendations for that reduction.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
You're welcome.
To Mrs. Shorter's point, to the public who may be watching, this may feel extreme, right? We've gone from 0 to 60 in a hurry here in terms of some of the recommended cuts we're talking about. But the facts are, we have a fiscal report twice a year, and we have been talking about this. The facts are, as Mr. Smith alluded to, we've already made cuts. A half-staff position, other cuts, leading up to this. So now, when we look for more cuts, those cuts are meaningful to our district. Mr. Smith, his team has spent a tremendous amount of time working on this. It's not an afterthought. It's very intentional.
If I could add one additional comment that has come up in our conversations as we've had these conversations about, what are our options? And it just dawned on me that back in 2009, we went through a similar process in this district where we eliminated block scheduling. And I was high school principal at that time. And so we lost, 14, 15 staff members. And I know the middle school went through some pretty massive cuts at that time as well. So as a result of having gone through this, back in 2009, that's part of the reason that this is such a struggle, because we've done this before. And so there's just, in our opinions, and again, I'm not trying to get into opinions here, but I'm just trying to help people understand that process and why it's so difficult. We did this in 2009. And so we don't have a block schedule to eliminate. And that's the challenge. That's one of the biggest challenges. We've gone through this. And again, we've talked about being fiscally responsible in the past. And so again, when you live like that, that makes it harder to find places to make reductions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for further articulating that. It's exactly where I was going with it. Any other questions or comments at this time?